Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 7, The Broken Man. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Game of Thrones. So I have to give a spoiler warning for Game of Thrones up to Season 6, Episode 7. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. However, this video will not contain other kinds of spoilers such as from the novels or from production leaks, so it will be free of those kinds of spoilers. So, looks like we got another setup episode. I know I said the same thing last week, but I think it applies even more to this episode than it did last week. It's mainly just set up for things to come. So overall, this episode got me excited for the episodes to come rather than being an exciting episode in its own right. But nothing wrong with that, as serialized shows like this need setup episodes like this, and it served its function well. So let me begin with where the episode begins, with the big revelation that Sandor Clegane, the Hound, lives. He's taken up with the village of poor people led by a poor Septon of the Seven, played by Ian McShane, whom is not named in this episode but plays a similar role as a character from the books known as Septon Marrybold. So for the purposes of this review, that's what I'll refer to him as. Anyway, he is the leader of a small, modest community that are trying to rebuild after the devastation of war, and we see that Sandor Clegane has taken up with them. We get the backstory about how Septon Marrybold found the Hound after his fight with Brienne where he was dying and wheelbarrowed him back to the village, all the while expecting him to die, but he never did. Although he doesn't seem quite the same as his book counterpart, through the conversation, we do find that Sandor Clegane has a different outlook on life and for once seems remorseful and about all of the harm that he's done. He also seemed to form a bond with Septon Marrybold and the village he lives in. Septon Marrybold himself is quite a different creature than High Sparrow. Rather than pretending to be modest like he does, he actually is modest and more open to others' beliefs and different interpretations of his faith. He seems more modeled after the down-to-earth local priest rather than the high priests like from the Vatican. Although he is a very likable character who seems genuine in wanting to help people, and I do believe Sandor has been changed by him. When Septon Marrybold gives a speech about his past, he reveals that he was every bit of an evil man as the Hound was, as he stole, he burned villages down, he killed small children, but he seemed to overcome his past and works now to only do good. And I do believe the Hound was moved by this story and will to try to do good. However, things come to a head when three riders from the Brotherhood without banners show up asking for supplies for their quote-unquote protection. So it's obviously a protection racket. But Septon Marrybold tells them they have nothing, but then they ask for food, so the Septon invites them to supper, but says they have not enough food to spare. So they ride off. Septon Marrybold and Sandor then have an argument about what to do about the riders, as Marrybold refuses to take up violence, but Sandor argues that it's better than being dead, which is a pretty valid argument. The Septon then invites Sandor for dinner, but he refuses as he has more wood to cut or to chop. He must have been pretty far away from the camp because he heard screaming and sounds of sword fighting, but by the time he got back to the camp, he found it completely burned down and everyone killed. And then he comes across Septon Marrybold's dead body hanging. He then angrily picks up his axe. So I don't think it's too hard to see where his story goes from here, as it seems pretty self-evident that Sandor will find the other three outlaws that visited them earlier and kill them. The real question is, what does he do after that? And I think that the Septon's words on him had a lasting effect. Although he disagreed with his refusal to commit violence, especially when under threat, I do believe we will see a new Sandor Clegane that's been reformed and will stand up for the little guy. But will do so with violence. But we'll see. This does make me wonder about the Brotherhood without banners, as this is quite different than how they were portrayed in Season 3, as they were actually sticking up for the small people and seemed to have a good relationship with them and would actually help them out. These guys, on the other hand, are just thugs who weren't at all interested in protecting the little people and was using it as an excuse to steal from them and kill the whole village when they had nothing to give. So I wonder if the Brotherhood has changed or if these are rogue elements acting dishonorably that the main part of the Brotherhood would disagree with. We'll just have to wait and see. So next, I'll go to King's Landing, where we see Marjorie chatting with the High Sparrow as she seemed to be completely turned over to his side. However, I think it is an act because Marjorie is the master of putting on acts. However, that being said, I don't think that she is playing the High Sparrow as such. I think she's giving it up and sees that the High Sparrow holds all of the cards, so is playing to what he wants. So the High Sparrow mentions that he heard that she no longer joins her husband in their marriage bed, and she claims it's because once she saw the light of the face, she no longer has those desires, but the High Sparrow insists it is her duty to produce an heir to the crown. So I wonder what the real reason she doesn't have sex with him anymore. We know desire had nothing to do with it in the first place, and it has more to do with her wanting to manipulate him, as well as she was desperate to get an heir so she could seize control over the throne. So what seems apparent now is that the High Sparrow is now the one with all of the power over the throne, and his control comes through Tommen, and he wants her to bear an heir so that his control can continue. And that makes me wonder if the reason she no longer wants to have sex with Tommen is because she doesn't want an heir, because she doesn't want the High Sparrow's influence to continue. And the other thing the High Sparrow asks Marjorie about is her grandmother, and says that he fears for her safety if she doesn't see the light of the seven, and is a very obvious veiled threat against her. So Marjorie invites her grandmother to talk with her, and Septon and Nella is there, and Marjorie refuses to send her away, and it's obvious that she's being watched and is under the thumb of the High Sparrow and needs him to believe that she will continue to be under his control in order to keep up this act. So while talking to her, Marjorie keeps up this facade of being all pious, but pleads with her to leave the city and return to Highgarden, but she's trying to communicate the undercurrent that her life is in danger if she stays in King's Landing. Marjorie slips her a piece of paper, and Lady Olenna gets the message, so decides to return to Highgarden. So Cersei then goes to see Lady Olenna to confront her about her leaving the city and tells her that they need to work together, but Lady Olenna points out that the whole thing is Cersei's fault to begin with, and surprisingly Cersei doesn't deny it and admits to it, likely as a way to try to gain her trust, but it doesn't work as Lady Olenna got the message that she's in danger from the High Sparrow and is leaving, and suggests if Cersei's smart, she'll leave as well. But she replies, never. Then Lady Olenna very bleakly lays out the situation for Cersei, as she has no support, her brother's gone, her family abandoned her, and the people despise her. And it was really great seeing Cersei's response to this, as she was just very visibly seething over this. So it makes me wonder what her next play is going to be. She's obviously not going to simply give up the way Olenna has. So it was originally my prediction that the High Sparrow would try to seize control of the crown, but he has already succeeded through manipulation of Tommen, as Tommen is just a tool who is easily manipulated and and whoever controls him controls the crown. At first it was the Lannisters, then it threatened to be the Tyrells, but now it is very clearly the Faith militant that control him. So he has pretty much already won. However, I don't think Cersei will simply stand for that. So it'll be interesting to see what her response to him is. It can't be as simple as her sending the Mountain to kill the High Sparrow, as Jaime already suggested that and she rejected it. So it makes me wonder what her next play will be. So next let's go to Jon Snow, Sansa, and Davos's amazing tour of the North. They started off in the wildling camp where the other wildling fellow speaks up against joining the Starks in their fight, saying it's not their fight, but then Jon points out if they don't fight, they'll be a target by the Boltons, and then Tormund makes a speech about how Jon died for them, and if they're not willing to do the same, then they're cowards. But then 1-1 stands up and simply says Snow, and that's probably what clinched it, and then the wildlings pledged to fight with them. So this scene was almost unnecessary, as we already knew the wildlings would fight for the Starks. That seemed to be a given in the show so far, but it does make sense that some of them would need some convincing, and I suppose it was cool to see 1-1 stand up for them. So next up on their amazing tour, Bear Island, and I really love this scene. Young Lyanna Mormont was played really nicely, as I totally bought her as a no-nonsense head of a great house, and it was great how she was so curt with Jon and Sansa, and was like, I think we had enough small talk. A lot of people assumed that the Mormonts would automatically side with the Starks because of the note she sent to Stannis last season about there only being one king in the north and his name is Stark. Jon even reminds her of this letter, but she's still very indigent and requires a lot of convincing, and it ends up being Davos who talks her into it, as we've seen when he went for Stannis with the Iron Bank, that Davos is great at talking people into doing things. So he is proving himself quite useful. So they manage to talk her into it, but find she only has 62 fighting men to give them, which of course is hardly anything, but at least it's something. Next up on the amazing tour, Deepwood Moot, where they try to gain the support of House Glover, but with less success as he refuses, and his reasoning was pretty solid, as the Boltons helped them regain their castle from the Ironborn. So why would he fight against them? And when Sansa tries to press him with, their vows to protect House Stark, he brings up how his family died fighting for Robb, who abandoned them and let the Ironborn take over their castle. So his response makes perfect sense here. I thought maybe that Davos would speak up again and talk him into it, but I suppose he had nothing. I think these two scenes were meant to show the spectrum of the reception that they received on their tour, as either stern reluctant acceptance or outright refusal. As we learn in the next scene, they visited many other castles off screen, so I think these two scenes were meant to indicate how the rest of the tour went. So the tour is apparently over, as the Stark forces gather at the same place that Stannis' forces camped at last year, which I'm sure was convenient for the locations people on Game of Thrones. Anyway, Davos talks about how Stannis chose this location for a reason, as it's a good location. However, Jon warns that they can't stay there long because they can't bear a storm, which is in fact what defeated Stannis. So Davos then lists off their support: the Wildlings, the Hornwoods, the Mazons, and the Mormonts, which is not a very large force at all. Sansa warns that they're not ready and they need more men, but Jon refuses, saying that there's no time. But Sansa still doesn't seem convinced. Then we see her eyeing the ravens, and then we see her writing a letter ready to send off. So we don't know what this letter says. says or what she's up to, but I would imagine that it's a plot to get them more men. Jon mentioned in the previous scene that they sent out ravens, even mentioning House Manderley, but obviously they haven't heard back from them. I think Sansa has a plan to gain the Manderleys alliance, which is the only other major house of the north that hasn't already claimed for the Boltons. Or perhaps she might be riding Littlefinger and decided to take him up on his offer of the Vale army. But I doubt it. I think it's some sort of plot to try to gain the support of the other houses, but we'll see. So now let's go to the Riverlands, where we see Jaime and Bronn lead a huge Lannister force to Riverrun to help the Freys lay siege to the castle. But when they get there, they find that they're doing a shit job at it. Blackwalder threatens to kill Edmure unless the Blackfish yields the castle, but he refuses and calls his bluff, and so they don't kill Edmure. So Jaime tells the Freys that he's taking over the siege. Blackwalder is indigent, but the other Frey, Lothar, receives him more positively. But it's quite funny the way Jaime puts Blackwalder in his place when he's being a dick. So then Jaime meets the Blackfish to parley, but the Blackfish basically tells him to fuck off, as he has no intention of giving in one little bit, and warns that they have enough provisions to last for 2 years. So I don't really have much to say about this scene, as this went down pretty much exactly as one would expect. I'm a lot more interested to see how the siege will play out in the coming episodes. So next we see Theon and Yara arriving with their Ironborn fleet in Volantis, no doubt on their way to Meereen, and we get a scene with Yara and Theon drinking at a brothel where Yara is making out with a prostitute, but pauses to have a heart-to-heart with Theon. And I found this scene pretty interesting, as Yara confronts Theon about acting like a beat dog and encourages him to be more like an Ironborn. I like how she tells him he might as well just slit his wrist or start acting like an Ironborn. This was a great scene, as it showed Yara's bond with Theon and how she needed him and was encouraging him to be his old self again, and she does confirm that they are on their way to make an alliance with Daenerys. So again, I'm just more interested to see how this turns out, and it seems like Theon might play a part in trying to woo Daenerys, and the fact that they don't have 1,000 ships, which is what Daario said Daenerys needed, is a bit interesting as well. So yeah, I'm also more interested to see where they go with this. So next we go to Braavos, where we see a man talking about how the Iron Fleet is in Slaver's Bay, which can't be right, because Euron couldn't have made it all the way to Slaver's Bay already, because they still have 1,000 ships to build, and Yara and Theon are still in Volantis. But I suppose this information is just wrong, and the correct information is that they're on their way to Slaver's Bay. Anyway, Arya goes up to the man she recognizes as Westerosi and books passage back to Westeros. She plops down a whole bunch of money in front of him, demands a cabin, and says that they'll leave at sunrise. So that must be a lot of money, where Arya feels she can dictate their departure time. Anyways, as Arya looks over the city, an old lady comes up to her and was like, "Sweet girl," and it was the most obvious thing in the world that this was a faceless assassin. I can't believe Arya wasn't more on guard, as she should have known. The faceless men would be gunning for her, and we learn it was in fact the waif who stabs her with a knife several times, but Arya gets away by jumping in the water and manages to let the waif think she's dead. Okay, so several things. They better come up with a good explanation on why Arya doesn't die from these nasty stab wounds. But of course she won't die. We all know that she won't die, but by all rights she should. Also, the waif is being rather negligent by simply assuming she's dead and not following it up by actually looking for a body to confirm it. These are supposed to be the best assassins in the world, so it seems kind of sloppy to me. So it seems like everyone was being a bit negligent here, but whatever. It'll be interesting to see where they go with this storyline as well. So, my rating for The Broken Man out of 10 is a 7. Very good. I love the scenes with Jon and Sansa's amazing tour. It was great to get confirmation of the Hound's return, as his storyline played out quite nicely. I totally bought Septon Merrybolt as a character. The Arya scene, while short, was intense. But overall, as I said, this was just a setup episode that has me more excited to see the next couple of episodes than I was about this particular episode. So that's it for my review of The Broken Man. Be sure to check back here every week as I continue to review episodes of Game of Thrones. Be sure to check out my live discussion with Apkin Compco tomorrow, Monday at 7 p.m. Pacific Time and 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the US, which will be 2 p.m. Tuesday afternoon for me here in New Zealand, as we go into a bit more detail about this episode. Also, be sure to check out my channel for many more videos on shows like Star Trek, Orphan Black, and more, and be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. Thanks a lot for watching.